Welcome to the Dear Lovejoy podcast special. Today's guest is the Reverend Richard Coles. You might know him because he used to be in the Communards. You might know him because he was on Strictly. You might know him because he goes on to Chris Evans's breakfast show often, gives thoughts for the day. He's got his own Radio 4 show. He is the most famous reverend, vicar, priest. Don't know really what's the right terminology. It's a good interview though. We discuss faith. We discuss being on Strictly. We discuss
clubbing in the 80s.
Clubbing in the 80s, yeah, coming out. The whole gay scene. Which
Jimmy Somerville.
Jimmy Somerville. Yeah, there's lots
really good.
of stuff.
It was a really great interview.
Politics and religion. We discuss a bit of that. I find it fascinating because, as I mentioned to him in the interview, I don't have a faith, so I'm intrigued by it all. It all seems so completely bizarre.
Well, it was really nice afterwards. He complimented you on your questions, said it's really nice that someone's asking me such direct questions, and he gave really great direct answers.
Oh, good. Well,
I really enjoyed that. That was a standout interview for me, I would say.
I thoroughly enjoyed it because I as I say, I don't have a faith, so to actually speak to someone who's can educate me on it, and he understands it from my point of view as well, which I think is interesting.
Well, it was interesting. I don't want to spoil the thing, but he says he knows both sides of faith because he didn't have faith when he was younger. Now he has it, and so he's not a preachy person. He's just really interesting and really kind, isn't he?
And very funny.
Yes, very. Yes, we should say that as well. Yeah.
Here it is.
This is just a guide to modern life. Modern life is hard to get just right. It can frustrate you and annoy. And if it does, right into Dear Lovejoy.
Welcome to my kitchen, Reverend Richard Coles.
Hi.
How are you today?
Admiring your kitchen.
Do you like it?
I like it a lot, actually. There's a lot quite professional, standard-looking kit around, and I'm coveting that.
That's Simon's influence, Simon Rimmer. He told me if I'm going to do the kitchen up, make sure you get a proper oven and all that sort of stuff.
That's the thing, isn't it? I fell in with a chef, and before I know it, I'd had to get a Thermomix and everything.
Well, do you know what you don't realise about cooking is that when chefs want to do, like if you're a professional driver, you don't want to drive a Fiat Punto, you want to drive a Ferrari or something like that, and it's kind of the same with the cooker and the ovens and stuff. They like a range of heat and stuff like that. Anyway, every guest who comes on, I buy a present for, and I've got you this bottle of wine. I know nothing about wine, but I've got this nice little man in a shop. He's not so little, actually. He's very French, and he advises me on wine, and he said this was a good one. So,
well, I like a Pomerol, so I'm very happy with that.
Oh, you know your wines, then?
Not really. I mean, I know a Pomerol from a Gewürztraminer, but that's about it, really.
God, you're speaking a foreign language to me. I know nothing about any of them. I just walk in there and go, hey, can I just have a bottle of wine, which is good and people who know something about wine would like? Right, let's first of all talk about Strictly. Enjoy the experience?
Yeah. Well, I enjoyed the fun bit. The dancey bit is brilliant fun. The getting kicked off bit is not so much fun. And you kind of realise after a while it's in fact two programmes. It's the fun programme and then it's the booting off programme. And everyone kind of talks about the fun bit, but actually the booty off bit is quite interesting too.
Why interesting?
Because it's quite brutal, actually. And you're invited into this world and you have a wonderful time, and then all of a sudden, bam, you're out. Especially in my case, because I was out early. And it's like going to a really good party and then being made to go home. Except you stand on the outside looking through the window, in it, everybody having a good time, trying to look gracious about it. But it is quite weird, actually.
My youngest daughter, Jamie, started watching with me, and she got very excited because she knows Simon, and she loves Simon and Karen. And I remember watching her the week after Simon got knocked out, and she said to me, Daddy, I watch Strictly with you as long as Simon doesn't get out again. I don't like it when that happens. And she couldn't quite get her head around the idea that we were going to eliminate people. And it made me think a lot about life, how everything we do now has to be a blooming competition. And I suppose there would be no show if it wasn't a competition. But just the idea of watching people dance was quite nice for her. She didn't need that competition bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's the jeopardy that drives the show. And I'm certainly not complaining about it because, you know what you're going into. Well, you don't, but you sign up for it anyway. But there is something... And also there's something rather ritual about it, that you feel slightly that you're being taken out and executed, which was quite bracing.
Why did you do it?
I did it because I have had this belief that there was, in fact, a significant global dance talent waiting to be discovered. And then I laugh about it, but actually, seriously, honestly, the tragic truth is, a part of me did think I would be really good at it. And what I discovered was that I was really bad at it in front of 12 million people.
What made you think you'd be good at it?
I think I've always been... I felt that there is an athlete of grace imprisoned within a fat middle-aged vicar's body, but actually there's just a fat middle-aged vicar imprisoned in a fat middle-aged vicar's body. So it's useful to discover that. And I have to say, I did have a fantastic time. And I don't, there are worse things than making a fool of yourself, and I don't mind that. I just didn't want to go.
How did you feel then when you were outed from it?
Well, it was sort of... worse in a way, because I thought we would go through, because I thought I'd kind of get the novelty vote. I didn't get enough of it to stay in. So I was really not prepared to go home. And in my mind, I had a whole sort of arc of my Strictly story, as it were, as we talk about. And all of a sudden, that had to be dramatically and swiftly revised. And I was really upset for Di, my partner, because it was her first British Strictly. She'd done the Australian version. And I felt I'd rather let her down. Well, I didn't feel I had rather let her down, actually. Poor old thing, she worked so hard with me, and I was just so bloody awful. I can't tell you how difficult it is.
Yeah.
I knew it'd be physically demanding, but I just didn't realise how mentally demanding it would be.
I don't think you were bad enough. That was the problem. And that's
bad too.
Yeah, you were. No. That's a compliment. I think you weren't balls bad, were you?
Well, I thought apparently there was a poll among the professionals, and I won for the worst ever paso doble. Although I think Ed was a close second. But there you are. That's how it went.
I had Simon and Karen on this podcast the other day. Simon always tells me you bonded very quickly.
We
all
did.
Of you,
yeah.
Not just you and him, but all of you. The celebrities bonded. Was it a good year for that? Do you think, or do you think that would happen every year?
Well. The celebrity producer, Vinnie, she said it was the best year they'd had for people getting on. And of course, you always think there's going to be an arsehole. And actually, there wasn't an arsehole. And then I thought, well, that means maybe I was the arsehole without realising it. But I genuinely think we did all get on really, really well.
Yeah.
Simon and I bonded very quickly because we were staying in the same hotel and we were both desperate for something decent to eat. So we went and found this really nice French bistro in Richmond where I had an excellent steak.
Oh, beautiful. We're going to talk about your album in a minute,
yes.
Because you've got an album coming out. Before we do that, big news has happened this week. Prince Harry is getting married to Meghan Markle. You should marry them. We were thinking it's a celebrity wedding. They need a celebrity priest to marry them.
Well, I sort of hesitate to describe myself as a celebrity priest, although others do. I don't think you can really be one.
You're the most famous priest we got, aren't you, in the country?
I guess so, but of course the royal gigs go to the Archbishop of Canterbury, and rightly so, because
he's the boss.
Well, that's that's how it works. Although, of course, some people are wondering. Of course, Meghan Markle has been married before and is divorced, and so do you remember there was some kerfuffle over the Prince of Wales marrying Camilla Parker Bowles? In the end, they had to do it at Windsor Registry Office. But from what I gather, there's going to be a church wedding. So,
why are you not allowed to marry somebody who's been divorced?
Well, you are actually in the Church of England.
Right.
It's a matter of conscience, and that you can, the incumbent, whoever's in charge of the parish, at his or her discretion can. But because the vows you take in a marriage service are meant to be for eternity and meant to be exclusive, and of course relationships don't always work out, and so we have a provision for people who've already been married, which is a kind of blessing of a wedding, which is not quite the same as a marriage. It doesn't require people to take vows that they've already taken.
Do you like performing weddings?
I do, yes. Although I got told off by a bride the other day.
Why?
Because I wore a golden cope, which is a really lovely bit of blingy vestment that you can wear at weddings. And she said to me, it's meant to be my dress.
Do you do the same? Do you do the same thing when you marry someone, or how much time do you spend researching the people and getting?
Well, in my present parish, I know them because we're a small kind of country parish, so I know everybody there. In my last parish, which was Knightsbridge, you didn't really know. People used to come there because it was a kind of smart church. So you'd get to know them. We used to make them come for 6 months, and then you'd get to know them. And I enjoyed that, actually. And also, in a vicar's kind of daily round, you're often spending time mostly with people towards the end of their lives, and often with school kids. So to get people in their 20s, 30s and 40s, it's not a cohort we often encounter, so it's good for that reason.
Do you like doing funerals?
I love funerals, yeah.
Why?
Because I think it's still one thing we do uniquely, which is people, when they lose someone, often kind of it goes off like a bomb in their lives, because the loss is just so horrible and hard. And we have something to say about that more than anybody else has to say about that, I think. And if we can make our case for that, it often really begins to sort of bloom in people's lives in a way which is moving, I think.
When you say we, you mean...
churchy people,
right,
or religiously people.
Yeah, because I was listening to a podcast on this the other day, and our relationship with death is poor.
Very poor.
Our relationship with things coming to an end is poor, but especially life. Yet we're all going to have to go through it, and this is something that I think maybe as a society we need to look at in more depth.
It is a great irony, isn't it? A society which sort of prides itself in its modern version as being kind of frank and open about difficult subjects. The one thing we're all going to experience is the one thing that's so kind of exported to the edge of our concerns now. And we don't even say dead anymore, we say passed away, don't we?
Yeah.
There's kind of, and wherever our language starts getting euphemistic, there's probably something there that needs looking at.
My brother died when he was 37, so I experienced death too early, really. Like someone very close to me. Obviously, grandparents are gone, but not someone like my brother. And so I've been...
You've been there?
Well, I've been contemplating it for years now, and I got very scared by death a lot, and now I've sort of come to terms with the idea of it and think about it as probably a positive thing. So someone said to me once, I'm not scared of dying, I'm scared of not living, and I think that's the sort of the great way of going through life. You know it's going to happen, so live your life until it happens. So, but obviously with someone like you, it's I don't have a faith, by the way. I'll tell you about that in a minute, But for you believe there's something afterwards, so it's comforting for you. Whereas for me, I don't have that belief, so it is very final.
I don't think Christianity is comforting, actually. I think it's challenging. And the promise of what lies beyond doesn't get you off any of the bad stuff. It doesn't stop you being scared of death. It doesn't stop you. And also, in my job, I'm often with people at the end of their lives, and it's not always elevating or pretty. It's sometimes really tough and difficult and horrible. And you're not let off any of that. There's just the promise of something on the other side of it.
Yeah, because that must be very hard when you're dealing with people who are grief-stricken and they're looking for answers and they're looking for you to provide them.
Often what people want is for the person who's died to walk through the door.
Yeah.
And that's not going to happen. And they look to you sometimes as being the person who can somehow open the door.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen either. So there's a very difficult thing sometimes, which is you have to help people to come to the realization that they're not coming through the door.
People are looking at you for the answers, aren't they? When it's when you die, but you don't. What sort of answers can you give them?
Try not to give answers. I try to think of ways of asking more interesting questions. If that doesn't sound too pat, I know it does. And also it's simply being alongside people. I think early on when I was first ordained, I used to think that I did have to give answers, and so people would be talking to me and I'd almost interrupt them to give them the kind of theologically relevant piece of data. And actually that's not what it is. Often you just shut up and listen. Mostly it's about shutting up and listening, which for someone like me is a big ask. But I've learned to shut up and listen.
And what do people say you obviously go and see a lot of people who are on their deathbeds. What do people say when they are dying?
Stuff that's important to them, and that can either be something on their conscience. Very often it's about experiences that they've not been able to release into the rest of their life. At the moment, I'm seeing a lot of people, the last generation of people who fought in the Second World War, and often, I went to see a guy last year, parishioner, and he was on his deathbed and I went to see him, and he had served in the Pacific in the Second World War. He was a medic, and he talked about being on Dakotas that were evacuating the wounded to Australia from, I think, Burma. And so he was an 18-year-old kid with bags of saline in these rattling old Dakotas being shot at by Mitsubishi Zeros. And the horror of that, he was very clear about. And then he was taken prisoner. and was in a prisoner of war camp in the Philippines and then Japan. But because he was a medic, he kind of, I imagine, had a slightly easier time of it than others. But his job basically ended up as burying his mates who died of cholera, dysentery, all those awful things. And he talked about that in really crystal sharp detail. It was as if he was talking about something that happened yesterday, and not sentimentally, just matter-of-factly. He wanted to tell me about it. And then after he died, I talked to his son and said, I was really moved by what your father said about his experience in the prison war camp. He said, what experience? And he'd never talked about it. Yeah. And that happens quite often. I realise now it's because I think lots of people just don't want to bring that stuff home. They want to leave it there because it was so traumatic and awful and needs to be kind of buried for them to live the rest of their lives, or to protect the people who are dear to them from the knowledge of that. But of course you do have to deal with it sooner or later, and quite often that moment comes as they approach their own deaths.
Do you feel privileged to be around people when they're dying then?
Totally, yeah.
See, I hated every minute of being around my brother as he died. When I listened to this podcast the other day, the person explained that you should feel privileged to be around someone who's dying. It's a wonderful thing actually to be there when they die. And it's changed my view on it. Rather than blocking out all the time, I think about it a lot now. So
it's different when it's your... my father died a year and a half ago. And, you know, I'm used to that. But happening to me, it completely... I mean, I didn't want to do his funeral because I wanted to mourn, not work. So David, my partner, took the funeral. And someone asked me about it. I realised I couldn't remember a thing about it. It was just blank. I remember arriving, and I remember having the knees up afterwards. But the actual funeral service itself, I have no memory of at all. Because it's different when it's your own. Yeah.
Let's talk about this album.
Okay.
You got an album out, the Reverend Richard Coles, Songs for Christmas. What's on it?
Well, it's a very carefully curated Christmas experience. It's basically all my favourite Christmas music bundled together on 2 CDs. The idea being that I wanted something that was Christmassy, but also restated the origins of Christmas in the appearance, to everyone's surprise, in a very unimportant, overlooked, cold and dusty part of the Roman Empire, something quite unexpected and wonderful and magical. And that sometimes gets lost a bit, I think, in the Christmas that has become perhaps over.
What do you mean?
It begins with God bothering enough about us to be born as one of us in a manky old stable in a completely unexpected place out of sheer love. It's a remarkable thing. It's probably the most amazing thing that ever happened. And it's still, I think, remembered in all sorts of ways, sometimes faintly in what we do at Christmas. But I wanted to get back to the origin of the story.
So the album tells the story from the beginning through, does it?
I hope so, yeah. It's kind of... yes, it's the whole shebang, really. I mean, it's funny. I do carol services all the time, and it's interesting. Lots of people will stand and sing with enormous enjoyment carol services, hymns, without realising that they're expressing the doctrine of the Incarnation.
I've just got to point out you are not singing these songs because it might...
It's a great mercy for all concerned.
Can you sing?
Well, of course, since I've discovered that I can't dance, my sense of myself as being one of the great vocal talents of our time has perhaps I've had to trim my sails a little about that.
I've got to say, a couple of Christmases ago, I was feeling a bit miserable, and my friend said, let's go to this carol service thing, and it was a trendy one, and we turned up there, and I said, I'll come and I'll watch, and I'll have a glass of mulled wine or something. And then the song started, and because you know the songs, because they're around every Christmas, started singing, and just started getting into it, and by the end of it, I absolutely loved it. It was a very therapeutic experience, singing the songs. Coming together as a community to sing common material is really powerful, I think. So have you chosen the people who... Because there's various different artists who are... well, it's all my favourite, and I wanted something that was a kind of a sort of complete hodgepodge, really. But it's kind of all my favourite. There's 2 pieces on it which are kind of orchestral, which are just kind of Christmas. There's the Prokofiev, Troika, and the Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy. Right. Who doesn't love the Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy? So it's sort of music you put on Christmas Day or around Christmas time. Well, most of the music we put on is kind of
is, hope you have a very Merry Christmas and Jingle
Yeah.
Bells. And it's not that. This is stuff which takes you back to the stable in Bethlehem.
Does it frustrate you that Christmas has become about trees and buying presents?
No, I mean, I suppose it might have done once when I was a bit more kind of pernickety. I'm just glad now that people acknowledge that there's something significant about that time of year. And just anything that brings people together, I think is good. And it remembers, even if it's faintly, what the music on that album's all about.
Get 41 tracks on it. That's pretty good.
I call that a bargain, don't you?
Music's been a big part of your life, hasn't it? So, how did you start? How did you end up? Well, you started by playing with the Bronski Beat.
No. I started out as a choir boy.
Oh, did you?
So the stuff on that album is the stuff that I started out in music. I was a chorister when I was a boy.
Oh.
So I, at the age of 10 or whatever, was the boy who sang Once in Royal David City, having clawed my way to the front of the choir.
Right.
And so people will say, oh, what's funny being a pop star going to be a priest? But actually it's a return to where I started out.
Okay. But the years you were as a pop star...
I know, pop star.
Memorable?
Well, they would have been.
If you could remember them.
If I could remember. No, I mean, the bits that... Yeah, they were. They were incredible. I mean, it was my 20s where experience is so fresh and vivid anyway. But to have experience that was so kind of intense and unusual, yeah, it was very, very vivid.
How did it come about then? How did you end up working? Because originally you worked with Bronski Beat,
Yeah.
and Jimmy Somerville, and then you set up the Communards with him.
Yeah, well, it came about simply because I was a gay runaway. So I kind of ran away to London in 1980 from provincial England because you sort of had to. I didn't particularly want to. I've never been a very brave or intrepid soul, but I kind of realised that Kettering in 1978 was not a place which promised much in way of kind of opportunity for a young gay man. So I ran away to London when I was 18 and bumped into Jimmy Somerville, who'd also run away to London. I was living in a squalid flat in King's Cross. He was in a squat in Bloomsbury. And we just bumped into each other and we formed this group of friends, and we started something which sociologists now call the alternative gay scene, although we didn't know that's what we were doing at the time. And I think it was a generation of gay men who came to London who, long enough after the first impact of gay liberation, had kind of opened up space, basically clubs, pubs where you could go. But we'd also been through punk. So we had that we'd been energised and given an edge by punk. And so that was something new. And out of that, lots of things happened.
What did you run away to be?
Something that was not negatively defined. I mean, when I grew up in a world where if anyone thought about gay people at all, you'd think about disreputable and shaming events, usually in kind of dripping public lavatories. Shame, that kind of thing. And I think in lots of people's minds it was an idea that you were somehow a kind of sinister child abuser. And who needed that? And so we formed our own world and tried to kind of redefine ourselves, and that's how that happened. And London was, in the 1980s, London was a kind of churn of identity, subcultures all bubbling up. It was a very exciting time to be in London. And of course, Margaret Thatcher's first government came in 1979. On the other side of the Thames over County Hall, there was Ken Livingstone. Couldn't have had two more opposed political figures. And that added to the kind of intensity and the churn of that experience.
It was such a fascinating time then, wasn't it? I was growing up in the 80s, and that whole the gay music scene became such an important, pivotal part of being gay, really, for gay men and women, because it became mainstream.
Yeah.
So for me growing up, my parents, I imagined, thought, well, our Uncle Reg, apparently, he liked having men friends around, and no one talked about it. And and it was a shame on the family, apparently.
Just something not talked about.
Yeah, definitely. And yet, suddenly we were all talking about it because the music was so prevalent in our lives.
It was interesting, that was. I can remember seeing Bronski Beat on Top of the Pops for the first time, and there was Jimmy singing this kind of howling anthem of running away to the big city to make up your new life. And they were sort of surrounded by dancers in mullets and marble denim doing this kind of pants people sort of dancing. And Peter Powell saying, "You're not going to believe what this band's all about." And it was almost a sort of cultural entryism. we were, we could make it up ourselves, but we could get into the mainstream, and I think it had a real impact on changing people's perceptions. The 80s were very potent for that.
Was homophobia big at the time, though, in London?
Yeah, I think it was.
So was it tough to be hanging around?
Sometimes it was. Got bashed up a couple of times, once in Brixton, once in Islington. Once in Dijon as well, by National Front skinheads, or Front National skinheads rather. You forget it now, but it wasn't so much that was grim. I mean, it was horrible, but a fight was a fight, and there's something good about the solidarity of fighting our cause. I think what's much more insidious was when HIV and AIDS came along, and I remember reading a leader in the Daily Telegraph, and it said, "The problem with AIDS is that it's not confined to homosexuals." I remember thinking, well, thanks a lot. And it just told you what was in the minds of people then. So that was pretty awful. But...
Did you feel like you were part of something important, though?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we were a very tight, comradely little band, actually, and we had a vision, and we were vindicated, I think, pretty much.
And all those young men and women who were sitting in Kettering, gay, thinking, there are other people out there like me.
I think that did make a big difference. I mean, people often say that. I think, in a way, I'm glad that people have sort of forgotten that now, because for lots of people now, it's much easier. It's a more tolerant world, and who cares? I mean, I just noticed when
I'm still... Sorry to interrupt you. I'm still struggling with sportsmen who keep coming out, and we haven't had any footballers currently yet in the current Premier League or anything that happened. Yeah, but they're still struggling with the idea, and it's like, why have we... it's none of our business, by the way, what anyone's sexuality is personally, but it's like the idea that papers are still running. There might be a gay this, or there might be a gay... I find that quite unbelievable still, that they're doing that.
My impression is as well, I'm a football fan, it's not really an issue with supporters and players. I imagine, of course, supporters are going to have their fun with whatever anyone reveals about himself or herself. Players seem to me to be pretty cool about it. I've never felt that that's been an issue, no kind of locker room dramas. I suspect it might be boards, perhaps, managers and chairmen, perhaps, where resistance is kind of embedded, perhaps because of the feeling that it might affect commercial exploitation. What do you think? You know more about it than I do.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe. I don't. Do you know what? I really don't know, because I find that I was talking to June Sapong here the other day, and I think I'm such a media lovey now that I have no idea of what's going on in the real world. And I honestly believe that, because I sometimes speak to some of my friends from back home, and I'm quite shocked by their language sometimes. And I'm like, what? How are you saying that? But I think we've become... I'm very PC.
But I think I know what you mean. But I mean, that language is... I kind of wince when I hear it now. But I'd make a distinction between bantery kind of language and homophobia. It's not always the same thing.
No, except I tell you, I always think this, and I've not had many conversations on this, but if any of my children were gay, I wouldn't care. Yeah. But I think some of my friends would.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's a slight difference. Now, they'd obviously come to terms with it, but I think that would worry them. It wouldn't worry me at all.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a fluid situation.
How were your parents?
Well, absolutely. Well, my father's dead, but he was reconciled. I mean, I think I came out to my parents when I was 16, and that was 1978. And I think it was not something they particularly wanted to hear. It was difficult for them to deal with. But I never doubted that I was loved by them. I never felt for a second that I'd be banished or be diminished in their affection at all. So we worked it out.
I was talking to someone the other day, and he said coming out to my father wasn't the problem. It wasn't my father wasn't the problem. It was his friends I was worried about.
Yeah.
Down the golf club and all that. And he said that's why it took him so long, because he just thought his dad would have to go through it with him, and he didn't want his dad to go through it. And as it turned out, that's exactly kind of what happened. His dad was fine. His mates took the mickey out of him for a while, and then it all just settled down. He said he was fine with it.
And it does change. It was hard to remember what it was like back then in the end of the 70s, except that it was different. But if you just look at the index on social attitudes, there's been such a change. 1980-something, it was 80-20 against kind of inclusion of gay people, equality of gay people. It's exactly the other way around now. So we've moved a long way very quickly. Of course, you don't have to travel very far to find a different world. Russia, wouldn't want to be gay there particularly. And a rising tide of anti-gay feeling in places like Turkey, North Africa. So, it's good to be kind of mindful of that and vigilant. But in this country, and in places like here, it's been a dramatic change, I think.
What was Jimmy Somerville like? When you met him, he's kind of a strange voice.
Well, of course, as a former choir boy, the sound of a male treble to me was thrillingly familiar, but also strange because it was coming out of an adult rather than a boy. So that was fascinating. Jimmy was just such an exhilarating person to be around. He was background completely different from mine, working class background in Glasgow, grew up in a sectarian world of kind of violence and awfulness, hard drinking, hard fighting world. I said, why did you come to London? He said, because people discovered I was gay, and I thought there'd be some kind of dramatic, Genet-like story of misadventure that would eventually told me that he was the only boy in his class who bunked off to watch the Bay City Rollers open a carpet shop. So, but meeting him, and one thing was I didn't understand anything he said for about the first 6 months because his accent was so thick, and that was kind of a good way of getting to know somebody without understanding what they say. And then working together was exhilarating because we had completely different but complementary gifts, I think. So I was the kind of specky, classically trained public school guy, and he was this kind of completely instinctive, working class Glaswegian guy. And that was great when we were on song. But when tensions came into that, as they inevitably do, it kind of rather worked against us, because I don't think we really understood each other. I'm a middle class bloke who wakes up in the morning with the expectation that the rising arc of my life will continue.
Yeah.
And Jimmy, I think, still wakes up in the morning thinking, how do I survive today? It's completely different.
Are you friends with them now? You're not? Are
Yeah.
You? Oh, you are? You're back friends?
Yeah, we had things got kind of unmanageable between us, and we stopped working together and stopped seeing each other. And then we kind of came back together because Jimmy's flatmate, who he'd kind of met through me, a friend of mine, died. And so we met again at a deathbed, which has one of the effects of that, I think, is to redraw you into a circle of intimacy and trust. So we did. And then we'd kind of bump into each other a bit. And then Jimmy had a few years out in his 40s. I know he wouldn't mind me talking about this because he talks about it himself. But he had a big issue with alcohol. And his drinking got out of control. And in the end, he went to clinic and then went into a program and stopped drinking. And then emerged again, much the better for it. But the drink thing was a bit, and I realise in retrospect now, I spent a lot of my time dealing with the consequences of addiction in one way or another, and particularly alcohol. And it's very interesting now, realising that Jimmy had a huge issue with alcohol. It explained a lot of his behaviour that I found unpredictable and very difficult when we were younger. But when you're 20 and you drink like an idiot, it's just,
But you're what people forget about the scene is, or they don't forget, there was a new sort of music which arrived, which was high energy, wasn't it? So there was that kind of high energy beat. Drugs had arrived a lot in the clubs, hadn't they, by then? Had they started coming in?
Well, actually, party drugs came. I mean, high energy was speed. So we were all. Jimmy never took drugs, actually. He liked to drink, but he wasn't a drug taker, whereas I adored drugs and took everything going. But the base drug of that period was amphetamine. God, imagine doing that now, awful. But to sort of take amphetamine and stay out for 2 days and dance all night was just, I loved it.
Yeah, see, I don't think people remember this. It's like that dance thing happened because it was sort of disco before then, wasn't it? And then suddenly the high energy beat came, and so those clubs must have been amazing. That must have been like a spiritual experience, actually.
Exactly. I mean, Heaven, which was, enormous.
Yeah, I went to Heaven a few times back in those days.
I mean, if you were a young gay man from Kettering, to walk into Heaven was, oh my gosh, this is not a misnomer. Ian Levine, of course, was playing the records, and you were having all those kind of monster, high-energy 12-inch mixes and stuff. And it was so exciting. It was brilliant. And Funny, I went back to Heaven last year and talked to some people there, thinking it would be very different now, but they were saying exactly the same thing. People from, Croydon and Bromley who walking into heaven and finding, a whole new life.
Did you make any money, you lot, doing it?
Yeah, I think we did. I think Clive James once said, bands either make more than you think or less than you think. And I think we probably made less than you think. Jimmy made more because he had the Bronski Beat stuff too. I made enough money I pissed a lot up the wall, but I didn't want to, disappoint anyone. That's what pop stars are for. But I did end up with no mortgage and an excellent pension scheme, thanks to a very brilliant manager.
That's not very rock and roll.
But it's something I daily give thanks for.
Now I want to talk a bit more about faith, but before I do, I want to point out that I don't have a faith.
Okay.
And my parents never christened me. My grandparents hated them for that, but my dad was not into it at all. I've never really been to church, so I have very little understanding of faith. So I find the whole thing quite. I was going to say to you, if I say anything that offends you, just let me know, because I always worry about faith, that you have to tread around on eggshells around it, because people get very offended by questions I ask. And
I wouldn't be offended by questions.
Really?
No, do you think so?
Do you think that people...
I was an atheist for most of my life, and serious card-carrying, fully signed-up atheist. So I think I get it, although I'm not there now.
Well, just tell me if I'm saying the wrong things, but I always find religion quite bizarre because I don't have it.
Yeah.
So you know what I'm saying then. So you're an atheist, you look in and go, wow, that's quite strange. It's quite a strange... The religion's quite a strange concept for me. Yeah, I'm growing up in supposedly, I suppose, a Christian country. When did you find faith? When did it come to you?
When I was in my late 20s. I grew up in it, so I was in a world where that was my daily experience. In a public school choir, singing all weeks and services on Sundays and stuff, and singing the absolute core Anglican choral repertory. So that's what I grew up in. But I never believed any of it at all. From the age of 8, I was absolutely certain that the central premise was clearly specious, that it was a fairy tale, and that nobody in their right mind could live like that. So I was absolutely convinced of that, and started an atheist club in our choir with my friends Matthew and Porky. Yeah. And I used to love being a really annoying little twat to the chaplain by asking him kind of spaghetti monster sort of questions. Yeah. And he was very patient with me. But I was fascinated by people who did it. So, partly because I thought it was obviously hogwash, and then I would see people who had real integrity, who lived very sincerely by it, and did so without looking like they were being dishonest or lacking in integrity, quite the opposite. And I was just very impressed by that. And they sort of stayed with me. And then later, when it began to come into focus and make sense to me, I was grateful for having known them, I think.
So you're the perfect person to ask this, because you've experienced it on both sides. What does it feel like?
The moment of conversion was extraordinary and intense and overwhelming. And I walked into church one morning as a cynical spectator. Something happened, and I came out a participant, and have been ever since. It was that dramatic. And when I recall it now, it was like, just intense and profoundly physical and trippy and amazing and deeply emotional. I was completely overwhelmed by it, hopelessly. In retrospect, I can see it been coming on for a long time. You don't just, it wasn't a bolt out of the blue. It had been coming. But the moment, I think, where you kind of make that commitment, the leap of faith, I was completely unprepared for it. And I went back to the place where it happened the other day. I hadn't been for a while. And it's like a kind of good sort of PTSD in a way, because it's quite traumatic. Because a week before I would have said, in an uncertain world, I know one thing, and that is that there is no God. And then, boom. When
you get a faith, is it a bit like, so the modern word is mindfulness? Is there connection to that?
That's part of it. I think what it does is it completely transforms your view and experience of everything. So mindfulness, contemplation, repose, consolation, challenge, all that kind of... Those are all incidental to the central thing, which is like a reversal of polarity. And all of a sudden you become... I know what it's like. It's a bit like you kind of, turn the dial on an old radio and it's hissed and static, and then a bit of Radio 2, and then a bit of Radio Luxembourg, and then some Radio 3 or something, and then all of a sudden, boom, there's this kind of pure, clear signal that you've not heard before, but when you hear it, it changes you completely. It's sort of like that. But you lose it. And the tough thing now, particularly when you're a religious professional, is that the institutions of religion are probably more inimical to faith than anything else, far more inimical to it than atheism. But trying to live as a faithful disciple of Jesus Christ and realise what that means is worrying about the roof and handing out hymn books and moving furniture and dealing with your own inadequacies and the frustration of what you perceive as other people's. That can be very tough.
How does being gay and being Christian, how does that work? Because when you first found your faith, did you worry that the church would accept you?
No, never. It's never been an issue for me at all. I never had any doubt that there was any conflict between being a Christian and being gay.
There is, though, isn't there, in the church?
Well, the church's mind there is, but I never felt that. I've always felt that was... I think I've understood that. I could probably understand it better, but I've never felt that it's something that was internal to me at all. I've always felt on perfectly good terms with God on issues of my sexuality. How I behave is another matter. But I regard sexuality as a kind of given anyway, and there's loads of evidence to support that now. So the idea that somehow it could somehow have a moral value, it would be like saying, your height had a moral value or your haircut had a moral value. Just doesn't make sense to me at all.
What does the church think of you, though?
Well, it depends which bit of the church you talk to. The majority of the church in its history regards anything that isn't love expressed between a man and a woman in the context of a faithful and committed and exclusive relationship as less than ideal. And in sometimes, in places, homosexuality has been particularly notorious and singled out for very aggressive and hostile action on the part of the church. And it still is in some places. When I was in Uganda for a bit, I was a chaplain at Makerere University in Kampala. And it's the only place I've ever felt I actually did have to keep stum about my sexuality.
I think it turned me off the church a lot. That I remember there was some banners. I think it was on a gay march once. I've just got this memory of banners saying Jesus is gay and Jesus is a homosexual and stuff. And I was thinking, good on them for doing that. They were going against the church and the church's hatred for gay people. And I remember it sticking in my mind, thinking I'm on their side.
Yeah.
And so it's strange how these things happen, but it pitted me. I'm someone who's not into the church anyway, or doesn't know anything about it. It pitted me against them. I'm like, you end up taking sides on things, don't you? And so I end up taking that side.
And rightly so. What that doesn't allow for, though, is that the church is not a monolithic institution, and there are lots of people in it who are completely cool about people being gay, and that's great.
It's always gone. Sorry.
But that's a minority. But I think it's a minority on whose side history lies. I think there's a move towards. I think as soon as people get used to the reality of gay people and the utter prosaic unremarkableness of our lives, just like everybody else's, ceases to be an issue. And you see that changing now. Church of England is in a particularly difficult time around this at the moment because there's lots of people right up to the leadership who just accept that, it's just some people are gay, it's not an issue, and wish to make some sort of provision for that in what we offer formally, blessing of relationships, that kind of thing. But there's a huge and very resolute group within the church who would find that unthinkable. So we have this kind of deadlocked argument at the moment about that.
Are you important to the church because you're because you're a celebrity? You're on radio all the time. We hear you. You're on TV. You're dancing. You're doing all these things. You're putting a new face on the church for people like me.
I mean, I would really resist the whole celebrity priest thing, because it's a sort of oxymoron. You can't really be one, because there's a necessary self-effacement about being a priest. I think people would look at me and think self-effacement might not spring to their minds at the first descriptor of me. But I think of it as a mission priest, really. I think because of the peculiarity of my life and opportunities, I can have a place in mainstream media. And
that's important.
I think so, yeah. Because
for you and the church, both of you?
I think I am a representative of the church, and I think I stand in a tradition which actually has an awful lot to offer, and in the past took its place in the mainstream without any kind of embarrassment or feeling that had to be negotiated, or it was simply the case. And now that's not the case. We're much more marginal. And I'm concerned that sometimes the voices you hear are from our extremes, really. And to feel that I kind of I hope I stand in the sort of mainstream Church of England experience, so that I've got an opportunity to do so in mainstream media. And I'm not interested in preaching, I'm interested in preaching sermons from a pulpit in church, but in mainstream media I'm not. I just want to do what I do, but with the commitment I have and the sort of life that I try to lead as something that's acknowledged.
Yeah, and so even listening to you on this podcast now, I'm finding it fascinating, and I don't really engage in the church ever. And now
I don't blame you. I try not to.
But you're making me engage in it, and I'm thinking about it. So I think it's really important. There are, for your church, I think it's important. Is the church still important in our communities?
Hugely. It is in mine. One of the reasons I love I'm in vicar of Findon in Northamptonshire, 4,500 people, Middle England, a town and a place that's kind of, because I work in the media as well, I'm used to being part of the conversation that kind of presupposes that interesting things happen within the M25. Of course, lots of interesting things do happen, but most people don't live within the M25. They live in places like Findon, and if you trouble to get to know those sort of communities, you'll find all sorts of things that are of huge value. How communities function. My job as vicar is to sort of lightly organise the goodness of people on a good day. So, the sick get visited and the elderly get looked after and the children get educated, and we function as a community. The pulse, the heartbeat that keeps it all going. I'm involved in our local housing association, so we provide housing for poor people. I'm involved in the university, so we get people into education. We've got a nursery school we've just started, so we can get, it's that kind of stuff that's just fundamental to how good communities flourish, and rather gets overlooked. And the church has always been, in the Church of England, a kind of broker of that, along with other people. We've got an independent Wesleyan church too, and there are all sorts of faith groups roundabouts that's core business, but it's not often celebrated, I think.
One of the things that's prevalent in every human is jealousy. Are the other priests jealous of you because you've got such high profile? Because obviously, if you get into the job of being a vicar or a priest, I'm not sure what's the right word to use actually, but both. Okay. Well, if you get into that world, the idea is you want to talk to as many people as possible. Yeah. Spread your word as much as possible. You're doing it to more than any other member of the Church of England, aren't you?
Yeah, and to ways which I think profoundly irritate some people, not just those. I tend to have more of a creative engagement with atheists, actually, I think, because I kind of understand it, and I've been there myself. I think the people who I think I disappoint most are other people in the church who correspond with me to that effect, and that's quite often quite disappointing, because I'm not sure, if you unpack all that, I think part of it is perhaps a feeling that I get more than my fair share of attention, and more than my pay grade merits. I'm very conscious that, if I'm doing something like, if I'm doing the Chris Evans show, 10 million listeners, and I get my kind of 3 minutes opportunity to connect with people, and I really enjoy doing it, but I realise that if that works, then I've made an impact which probably exceeds that of most other people, most other clergy, especially clergy who are higher in the food chain than I am. I'm just a lowly vicar, and I think I probably get more attention than many more who are more deserving of my...
Well, I've got to be honest with you, I don't know who the Archbishop of Canterbury is.
Justin Welby.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're more famous than him in my mind, which is, does he ever call you? Do you ever call you up that you got to come? You ever just sit in front of him and he tells you off?
He doesn't tell me off. We have a jolly time sometimes.
Yeah.
He has a very nice garden party at Lambeth Palace every year, and I go to that. And we met him. I did a cookery demonstration with him once in Canterbury. He made a rather, I hope you won't mind me saying this, I thought a rather pallid omelette.
Do you know what? I only found out the other day. I had a royal biographer come on the show, and he was telling me about the Queen is head of the church. I sort of knew that, but really takes the role seriously.
Well, strictly speaking, she's not head of the church.
Oh, isn't she?
Jesus is the head of the church,
right, okay.
but she's the supreme governor, so she's the boss on earth. If you see what I mean, and she does take it immensely seriously. I don't think anyone could have lived her life as she's lived it without religious faith. And she takes it very. I know also, not only does she watch Strictly, she votes.
Does she? Did she vote for you?
I don't think she did.
No.
I don't know. I wouldn't presume to know the mind of our sovereign lady. But someone told me that they
Do you know
watch
her?
and vote. I don't. I've met her, but I don't know her now.
So I got in trouble when the biographer came on. I said, I just don't envy their lives at all, because they're born into it with no choice. You've got a choice whether you want to be a priest or you want to be a pop star. I've got a choice. They don't have a choice, really. It's very hard for them to get out of it.
I think if you see them close up, and I used to be chaplain at the Royal Academy of Music, and the Queen was our patron, so she'd come along once a year. And I know people in the royal household who are with her a lot. It's not my idea of fun. And I think, of course you live a life of enormous privilege, I think the thing I would find unbearable is, first, never being on your own. Yeah. And second, never being anonymous.
See, my big thing is freedom. Living in Britain, we're free. We're free. We don't have to vote. We can do what we want. We've got passports. We can travel. We are, as human beings on this planet, we're the freest people. And she's not. And so everyone was having a go at me because I said I don't envy them. And they were saying, my God, they've got all that money. But the money's not important. Freedom is much more important. The idea that you can do whatever you want. And in this country, we give you free health and we give you free education. Yeah. We're amazing.
I think that's true. But I think also what I've discovered as I've got older is my freedoms. I don't think I'm free to not do what I do now. I don't think I get a choice in that, because I think a vocation has a sort of element of command to it.
Yeah, you've eradicated a bit of your freedom by giving yourself to faith.
Yeah, but it's good.
Why?
Because in service, you find a deeper sort of freedom, I think. It's not about us. That's what I mean. Freedom is the kind of self-actualization, is it? Or the realization of us to do what we want to do. But I'm beginning to believe less in me, or more in me, as simply part of a greater thing alongside other people. So my realizing my freedoms has become, in some ways, not always, secondary. I mean, it's just on my right to have an Arga, put it that way. But it's become secondary to realizing the life of the community I'm part of. And that's about discipline and about duty. Really unfashionable things. I think the reason why the Queen, for me, is so impressive is she seems to really embody that more than anyone else I can think of, this notion of duty and discipline. It's not... I think they're really important. And I would hate to see them fade to unintelligibility.
I just think they must struggle. I think being somebody who's rubbish at being...
But you're a father, Tim.
Yeah.
You know what that's like, don't you?
Yeah.
What you sacrifice to enable your children to be what they can be. It's not so, I mean, you wouldn't, that's what people do, don't they?
Yeah.
But that circumscribes your freedom.
Yes, definitely. But she's on a whole different level. She's got a whole country, and she's aware that she was only born into it. She didn't achieve it. And I think that it must challenge you when you're lying that I did not do anything to become head of this.
Yeah.
And people are looking up to me, and it must be quite hard mentally.
But I think also what you do, and I simply would say this is an experience of vicars too. Again, it's not about us. I'm the 59th vicar of Findon.
Right.
So in 1217, a bloke called Geoffrey was the vicar of Findon, and he sat in church and saw the sun move across the sky as I do, and said prayers in the morning and in the evening, the rest of it, just like I do. In some ways our lives are unimaginably different. In other ways I think they're probably quite the same. And we're just, for a moment, tenants of the same accommodation.
What do you do to become a vicar?
Oh, it's endless. First of all, I mean, going to church is always good.
Give us a quick summary.
Well, what you do is once you've if you have a sense of vocation begins to come along, and that usually is after you've been in church doing it seriously for a while, you make a call, you go off, and you have this complicated series of discernment. So there's at local level, and they say, yeah, we think this person's got vocation. Then you go to national selection, and they go, yeah. I already had a theology degree, so I'd done my theology degree, 3 years of that. Then I was accepted for training. Then I went to theological college for 2 years and did a research degree as well. And then went into a training parish where I was for 2 years. And then did a second curacy where I was for 3 years. And then got my parish now where I've been for 8 years.
And can you, I don't know how the system works, can you eventually be Archbishop of Canterbury? Can you promote?
Technically I could. I wouldn't put money on it. I mean...
Why not? That's what we need. High profile.
Well, because for the first reason is I have no discernible vocation to that whatsoever.
Right.
And if I did do it, if there was some terrible kind of computer error and my name came out, I would be useless and miserable, right? Although there have been plenty of archbishops who've been useless and miserable.
You wouldn't be useless because people would listen.
But do you know what? I think I can do what I do effectively better doing what I do now.
Where you are, okay.
Yeah.
Right, let me ask you a question. This is my big question, the one I've been desperate to ask you.
Those were little questions.
Because it really is. This is the real thing that drives me mad. So let me ask it, and then we'll see what happens. Right. I think faith is used in a really horrible way with our leaders. Okay, Tony Blair, he said, "Let my God judge me," after his illegal war he took us into, which I thought was quite a weird thing to do and say. I didn't think Christianity was about war, and he said, "Let my God judge me." Bush said that he used God. He said, "God told me to end tyranny in Iraq." Obama spends all his life going, "I've got faith. That's why I do everything." There's a lot of stuff which happened under Obama's watch.
Yeah.
Trump, the big one, is a Christian. He's got all the. Well, let me just finish this, okay. Right? He's got all the Christian votes. Even the Archbishop of Canterbury a couple of days ago came out and said, "How are the Christians following him? I don't know." But he's doing it under faith. He's doing it under a Christian God. Theresa May says, "Faith guides me in everything I do." I'm sorry, I think it's bullshit. I don't believe any of them, and I don't think it's fair. I mean, why does God care about Brexit strategies? I do not believe. I don't think it's fair on me, someone of no faith, or a Muslim, or a Sikh, or a Hindu, to say for Bush to go. I don't even know what religion he is. I think is he a Catholic now? Did he convert?
Bush, no.
Sorry, Blair.
Blair is a Roman Catholic now.
It's not fair of him to say, "Let my God judge me." No, you're living here. And people are dying from decisions you make. You can't then just go, "A higher person's going to judge me, not us." I find it really hard when people use faith to say, "I'm a good guy because I'm a Christian.
Yeah,
I can make my decisions and God's guiding me."
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, because anyone can describe themselves as a Christian. I mean, Hitler was baptized a Roman Catholic, and sometimes people think, "Oh, well, Hitler was a Roman Catholic." Well, if he was, and technically he was a really bad one, right? And that you don't have to spend too long studying scripture and the tradition of the church to realise that the mechanized murder of millions of people is not really consistent with the values of the gospel. I think it's a really complicated thing. Faith can act as an accelerant of all kinds of bad shit, right? You see it all around the world, that people can use faith as a justification for behaving monstrously to other people, because if God is on your side, then God's not on their side. So somehow they don't deserve the dignity, which I would say is inalienable in all people, because it's actually put there by God. That would be my view. I think the other thing is there's something quite dangerous in religion, and this is where I think I'd line up with Richard Dawkins, although I would have a more broader view of it, I think. I think the promise of the afterlife can justify terrible deeds in this life. But as Christian Aid's slogan says, we're interested in life here and now, not just the afterlife. And if you're really concentrated on the afterlife, then that will affect the decisions you make now, because everything you do will have an impact on where you're going. Yeah. And if you act now in a way that betrays and subverts religion, or uses it as a kind of cloak for your own kind of, self-interest, or for your own, or as a kind of delusion to justify your suspect moral actions, well, that's something you're going to have to reckon sooner or later. So, I'm not surprised when people do it. I'm really not surprised when people... I mean, Donald Trump, for example, I think what Donald Trump does is court a powerful conservative religious cohort in America. But I don't think anyone would think for a moment, and there's a huge debate among the religious right in America at the moment about whether Donald Trump really is their man or not. But he lines up his legions on that side of the battle, and so I think they'll stand up and salute him for as long as it's expedient to do so. But that's simply symptomatic of what happens when Dante wrote about this in the Divine Comedy, always right about nearly everything, that when you mix up, as he calls it, the sword and the crozier, the sign of religious authority and the sign of secular authority, you get in big trouble, really. Christianity is not very... If people are kind of raising holy banners and stamping on the faces of other people, it's not really where we're at, I don't think. It's a perversion of where we're at.
I just find it really hard. I mean, as a Christian, I want to know what you think when the politicians are lining up and using it in what I see as quite a ridiculous way. I've got God on my side. So don't argue with me. Faith is helping me make these decisions.
It's a bit like, this is why I could never be the chaplain of a football club. Because I could never say... it's interesting when players come onto the field and they cross themselves, or they look to God, or they give thanks to God when they score a goal. God doesn't care if you win or lose.
Yeah.
Not interested. He's interested in who you are and what you are, irregardless of winning and losing. So I would be useless as the chaplain of a football club. I would last a day and they're never going to get rid of that guy.
Well, I don't know. That's kind of what Dr. Stephen Peters does, doesn't he? He says, just go out there and try your hardest. It doesn't matter whether you win or lose. That's kind of his mantra for all those athletes he gets and who are very successful. He tries to take the pressure off.
But that's a really good idea, isn't it? There's something powerful in that, is that there are more important things in what you're doing than your individual outcome.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not uncritical of religion. Believe me, I know, probably it's better than most people because I'm involved with it, about just how dark. The other thing about Christianity is about reality, and reality is about what human beings are like. And we contend, we're full of competitiveness and aggression, which is sometimes murderous and hateful. What we propose is that beyond that, there's the possibility of a life transformed. But it's not something that seeks to dodge that or diminish that. And we own it in our own lives all the time. I mean, I'm a useless Christian. I'm pathetic, self-seeking, full of rage sometimes. You should see me drive. And neglectful and all those kinds of things. But I kind of still stick with it because I know that beyond that, there's a possibility of a life transformed in which that stuff is forgiven and the opportunity for me to do better.
Is there a lot of politics between the various religions now? I mean, there used to be when I was growing up. There's probably just pretty much one religion in this country. Well, there was different versions of Christianity, but it's Christianity. Now we've got many different religions over here. Is there politics between them?
It's always been a battleground. I mean, in a way, our multi-faith environment now is probably more peaceful and irenic than it has been when Christianity has been the only game in town, because, again, we're fractious people. And if you look at some of the intense arguments that have riven the church over the 20 centuries of its existence, they're probably less intense now than they've ever been. It's interesting, just at a time when Christianity is least significant, we're probably in some ways better at getting on with each other than we ever have been, although huge areas of disagreement.
Can I ask another question? Why do you always wear your dog collar?
I don't wear it if I'm on holiday, or if it's actually I do wear it on my day off quite often. I wear it a lot.
Does it give you a certain amount of respect?
No.
You don't think it does? Whenever I see anyone in religious outfits, especially dog collars, I'm always like, oh, respectful.
Are you?
Yeah.
Well, I would say that's not often the case. I think it does provoke reactions in people. Some people, I'm sure, are respectful. I'm probably less likely to notice that. But often sometimes you get hostility from people.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, people who've been damaged by the church. I got shouted at by a woman in the park the other day, really, really angry because her mother had died and she'd wanted her to be euthanized, and her mother was dead opposed to that because she was devout Catholic and it had been traumatic and horrible for them. And I completely understand that. The worst one is when you provoke guilt in people, and you see particularly older people, there's a sort of flinch when they see the dog collar. But I think lots of people, it's curiosity. I think people are not interested in Christian doctrine, and they don't sing the hymns anymore. They don't come to church anymore in great numbers, but they're fascinated by people who make the commitment. And I think that's one thing we discovered on Rev, when I was working on that, was people, I didn't think it was going to, kind of comedy about a modern vicar in a kind of run-down London parish. But it really did capture people's imagination, I think partly because people are fascinated by people who make that commitment. Because maybe there's a part of us that I think, one thing that strikes me is in human history and in human reality now, most people in most places pray. It's simply what they do. Because faith, if you look at the world as a whole, the secular world is a minority world, in fact, not in places like Chiswick, but there you are. And in human history, most people have prayed. It seems to be something fundamental to human experience. And all of a sudden, that's just become edited out of people's lives now because we don't believe that stuff anymore, or lots of us don't. But there's a huge, huge, huge body of human history and experience that we, I think, disconnect ourselves from with difficulty because it shapes who we are, even if it's not something we consciously subscribe to. Nonetheless, it shapes the institutions we live in, our history that we're part of, and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think you can just edit that out at will. I think it still endures in various ways. And I think people are sort of haunted by it. And so when they see someone like me with a dog collar on, what might present to them is kind of, some people think Vicar of Dibley is a kind of trope of English situation comedy, and it can be. But I think underneath that there's probably a sense that we stand for something that was once really significant in people's lives and our national life. And that's still got something.
How do you go about doing your sermons? What's a good tip for someone to do public speaking? How hard was it the first time you did it?
Well, sermons are a very particular kind of public speaking. So you have to, when you're starting out as a vicar, those responsible for your training will talk about you finding your pulpit voice. And it's when you get into your stride as a preacher, when you discover the voice you need for that. My view is, there are different ways of preaching different sermons, but where I am now, my last parish everyone was a graduate and they wanted long sermons with some kind of serious attempt to make sense of Christian doctrine, which is fun. I love doing that. In my present parish, fewer people are looking for that. Most people are looking for something that's encouraging, that engages them and that speaks to their concerns. So I learned to preach differently. I don't say things like, if you look at the Greek text, because that's not something which engages people. I preach shorter, I'm more vivid, I use more examples from my own experience, I think. And I bang on about the same old things.
But when you're standing up in front of a group of people, it's not easy to do.
I love it.
Do you?
I love it, yeah.
But have you got any advice or tips for people if they've got to go and stand up? Obviously to give a sermon, but...
800 words.
That's your tip.
And here's a good tip. Don't use notes. Write your sermon and then put it away and learn how to deliver without text. And the other thing is a really good tip. Once you stand up to speak, do nothing. Just stand for 15 seconds. Say nothing, do nothing. And you'll find you get people's attention.
Do you know what? I went to a gig once and it wasn't a gig, it was Mercury Music Prize. And Damon Albarn was up for something. There was lots of other people in the room and they all could perform in front of you. I can't remember what he was doing. Was it a blow or a solo? I don't know. Anyway, I'm not actually sure it was there. This story's really bad, but I know Damon Albarn was there, and there's lots of other artists. And Damon Albarn got up there, and it was a TV event, I think. So everyone was running to time, as you know, and he just didn't do anything for about 10 seconds. Yeah. And rather than all the people, industry people, as you know, you've been to these industry events, everybody just talks and talks, drinks and eats and doesn't pay attention. Everybody in the room stopped and stared, and my mate went, "There's a pro. He's waiting. He's getting everybody's attention before he does it."
I learned it doing school assemblies, is that if you go in, you've got a primary school in Fine and Church Primary School, and the kids are excited to see you, and they're noisy. And the thing to do is not to go, "Shut up, shut up, shut up." It's to go, "Please be quiet, please be quiet, please be quiet." And that works.
That works.
Yeah.
Right, we've got questions we ask everybody who comes on our show, so let me go through these with you. What one piece of advice would you give to our listeners that has been valuable to your life?
Pay attention.
And in what respect?
It's very easy to be distracted by all kinds of stuff, static, surface noise, stuff at the edge of your vision and stuff, but try to concentrate and pay attention, and that repays you, I think.
Pay attention to
important stuff that's there, and yet we're too busy tweeting sometimes, mea culpa, to notice it, but just to pay attention. Shut up and pay attention.
Okay, good. I like it. What mistake do people make? Maybe doing your job or anything. What mistake do people make?
Not paying attention. Example.
Yeah.
I didn't see Brexit coming. I thought we'd wake up and it would be the status quo. If I'd paid attention to my own parish better, I wouldn't have thought that. So I think, like lots of people like me, middle-class, chattery, broadsheet readers, I think I thought the world would continue to be roughly what I wanted it to be, and then discovered that lots of people just didn't think that. And then when it did happen, and I did talk to people in my own parish, I understood it better. Lots of people felt, left behind, not sharing in the good fortune that others have shared in, and feel that they're ignored and overlooked, and they were pissed off with it.
I'm so glad you said that, because I listen to these debates constantly about and people are just throwing mud at each other, slinging mud, aren't they? So the Brexiteers are saying, the Ramonas, and the Ramonas are doing the other way around. They're all thick, the people who apparently voted for Brexit. No one's actually thinking, the same with Trump. Why did they do that? Yeah. They did it because they didn't think they had a choice.
And because they're treated with contempt by lots of people. I've got a guy called Chris in my parish who's just in training to be a reader, which is a kind of role that's unique to the Church of England, actually, and he's brilliant. One of the things I really love about Chris is that he's a white van man. He's a stonemason and a builder, and he drives around in a van, and he works incredibly long hours to look after his wife and his daughter. And he's really thoughtful, he's really intelligent. He doesn't, I think, is only just beginning to understand that he is. His view of the world is different from mine, and he relates to people much better than I do, because I think he understands the concerns of people who drive white vans for a living.
Yeah.
I don't really understand that, because I've never done it. I pay lip service to it, but actually working with Chris has been fantastic for me, because I've really begun to understand the way he sees the world, and to be more respectful of it, because I think a part of me, and I hate to admit it, thinks I'm more worthy of attention than people like him, and I'm not.
Why do you think that?
I think because, like lots of people who went to English public schools and then to elite universities and have letters after my name, I kind of think that I went to the Sandhurst of life, and that I'm officer class, and that people should... I probably don't think people should do what I say, but I think they should listen to what I say. And I think I'm kind of qualified for that. And of course I'm not, actually.
Yeah, I do think we need to start listening to everybody, and we've got to stop judging people. I've always said this, that which is an interesting thing to talk to you about, there was a spate of drunk women on public transport saying to people, get back to your own country. you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
That people were videoing them, and I think one of them ended up being arrested and all that. And I was thinking, rather than hammer these women, it was women, bizarrely, always sort of drunk women. And I say drunk. I think people were making out they were drunk. Why isn't someone asking them why they feel so disenfranchised in their own community? Yeah. Why aren't people sitting down with this person and saying, what is it that you feel? Why do you feel this way? Rather than us all just going, stick him in prison.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that kind of, I don't want to hear these bad things. I know I was in West Yorkshire for a bit, and I remember in the election 2005, wherever it was, going into the CAF, and I used to know these ladies in there who were these very traditional white working class Yorkshire women. Good fun, rude, punchy. And there had been a 13% swing to the BNP in that constituency. I went in and I said, blimey, you've seen the result? And so when I said there's a 13% swing to the BNP, and two of them went, yes. And I realised that they'd voted BNP because what they experienced was their world slipping away from them. They felt that they were living in a place where all of a sudden lots of people who they didn't know or understand were moving into their world, that their streets were no longer familiar to them, that their concerns were not really heard, and that politicians weren't taking them seriously. And all of a sudden the BNP came along, took off their boots and their bomber jackets and put on a suit and gave them a leaflet, and all of a sudden said something that chimed with their experience. There's lots more to say about that, of course, but it really struck me that I simply hadn't thought for a second that people like them could think something like that. But they did. Worth listening to that.
The most important thing we can do is make people feel like they're part of the community. This is what we're losing from the country, is what what we've lost, from the country. Bizarrely, I think it comes hand in hand with our lack of faith, because we haven't got a focal point, which is Christianity, because we've all moved, not we all, but a lot of us have moved away from that. People like me have never had it. So there's no focal point in the community, which means no one feels part of the community.
I completely agree with you, actually. One of the things I really love about my church is that I can stand at the altar rail giving communion to people, and in the same row next to each other there will be someone whose life is completely chaotic and disorderly, who sometimes turns up in church not wearing anything, sometimes wears something, can scream and shout and cause a lot of trouble, and has got huge addiction issues, and sometimes is so unruly that we have to call in the cavalry, if you see what I mean. Next to her is one of the most right-wing Conservative MPs in Parliament. And for that moment, they are absolutely equal. And I think that's fantastic. That there's a place where you can come, stand on the same piece of ground, and acknowledge each other as equals in a way which transcends your party commitment, your background, your income.
Yeah, but we do this in life all the time. So you're going to get me started here. Vote Tim. But we've got this stupid class system where we try and separate each other. You've got the school systems where you've got faith schools, you've got private education, and you've got your state schools. And we're separating kids through wealth and faith and everything else. We keep separating ourselves in community, and church used to be that one place where everyone comes together. And I don't want to go back there because I'm not religious. Sure. I don't want to do it. But there needs to be a way that we all feel part of the same, engaged in it.
I mean, it's not. I met a guy called Jordi Carbonell, who was the then retired leader of the Catalan Independence Party in Barcelona, and I talked to him once. This was 25 years ago. He's dead now, and he told me that he had been involved in the Spanish Civil War, and after Franco came to power, he was arrested and very nearly executed. Went to prison and then was booted out, and he came, like lots of Catalans exiles, to Liverpool, because there's a Department of Catalan Studies in the University of Liverpool. So it became a sort of centre for displaced, exiled refugees. So he turned up there to teach, and he was put into lodgings in Liverpool with this absolute classic working class conservative landlady who was completely devoted to Churchill, who was then Prime Minister. Or completely devoted to Churchill, he wasn't Prime Minister because it would be Clementine, it was just after the war. So it was a time of austerity. And she was horrified that the country had rejected Churchill and hated the Labour Party, thought Churchill was the saviour of the people and should be kind of given indefinite powers to rule because he had saved us from the Nazi threat. And she hated Clement Attlee and that administration. And then Stafford Cripps was the austerity chancellor, the last one, was chancellor then. And he came on the wireless one day and said, would you please go around and unscrew every other light bulb in order to conserve electricity supplies? And she got up and she went around and she unscrewed every other light bulb. And Geordie said, I was amazed by that. And I said, why? And he said, for the first time I realised I was in a country where national interest and party interest were not the same thing. She hated the Labour government, but she didn't for a second question their right to say, in the national interest, all do this. And he said he'd never lived in a place where that had existed before. And I thought at that moment, I am so lucky to be British. I'd never thought that before. I never realised that before. It never occurred to me before. That's the sort of thing I think we need to preserve and sustain, because it's a great thing.
Yeah, we need to all feel we're part of the community together.
And that there's an interest, which is not just about how we vote.
Yes. Yeah. Any life hacks?
Oh, yeah. You know how annoying it is when the silk ribbons in your prayer book fray?
No.
Well, believe you me, for a vicar, it's really annoying. Simply dip them in a bottle of clear nail varnish.
Ah, there you go.
Brilliant tip.
That'll come in useful. What is it like to be famous?
I mean, my instinct was to say I don't know, but I suppose I do know a bit, in the sense that I notice it if I'm at the station. If I walk through St Pancras, and there's a lot of St Pancras to walk through, I get stopped quite often by people who want to take a selfie or just say hello, say something nice, very occasionally say something not nice, mostly nice. And that happens more now. And I notice also there's a look that people have when they see you and recognise you and look away again. There's a sort of, it's not a double take, it's just a look of recognition. Part of me likes it. There's a narcissistic part of me that enjoys being the centre of attention. Dangerous, but there you are. And part of me feels a bit uncomfortable with it, because I know that feeding narcissism is a greedy beast and you shouldn't maybe do it. And part of me also just wants to be anonymous sometimes. So it's a sort of conflicted feeling. Also, it's an opportunity, so I can accept it as a reality and try to find a way of doing it that's decent.
I've got one more question. I'm just going to throw one more question for any of our listeners. If you were interested in finding your faith, what would you do? Go to a church?
I'd go to see your vicar.
You'd go and see the vicar?
Yeah.
And vicars would see you, would they?
Yeah. Bloody well should. It's our job.
I wonder. I don't know. It's funny.
The bit I think I enjoy more than anything else in what I do, and I love what I do, it's the passing trade, the knock on the door. Not always. I got to ring on the doorbell at 5:45 in the morning the other day, and I was awake but in my gym jams, and I came down to the door and I opened the door and there was a guy in combats holding a shotgun, and I thought, oh, this is how I die. It was actually an inquiry about baptism. Oh. But it turned out to be, of course, something more than that.
So I was going to say, can you stop me from doing what I'm about to do?
But it was quite, I sort of realised that was an interesting moment.
I know we've been going on at ages, but I am absolutely fascinated by this, actually, because I've never really contemplated Christianity at all. If you're going to do a sales pitch on me now and tell me what I'm going to get from it.
I'm not going to do your sales pitch. If I was selling you toothpaste, I'd do your sales pitch, but I'm not going to sell you toothpaste.
Why?
Because it's not toothpaste.
Yeah, but what? But how would I?
I think you're already interested, Tim.
Yeah, but I'm.
It's up to you what you do with that.
I'm such a staunch atheist.
Well, that's fine.
But I'm finding it fascinating that you're very eloquent on the subject. So I was just thinking, what would I get out of it if I was to?
Well, that's for you to discover. I'm not going to.
Well,
I'm not going to give you a bog off.
But do people come to? Because people often say Jesus came to me, or don't you have to go to find it? Isn't that the fundamental problem with religion? Is you have to go and find it. It doesn't come find you.
But I think you can be sometimes closer than you think. I was, and because all points are equidistant from God. It's not as if there's a kind of place that's nearer than others. There isn't. And your kind of relationship to that. The other thing, of course, is most of my friends are atheists, and live lives that are full of sincerity and integrity, and I celebrate them for it.
Oh God, that's the one thing I really can't stand about religious people, is they feel they have the moral high ground, whatever religion it is.
Yeah.
They quote some book at me and go, yeah, well, we've got a commandment, or we've got, I don't know, whatever they have in their books and everything, which is basically teaching love and peace and everything else. But every religion seems to feel that, and when you say to them, do you practice? Often they say, well, not really, but I've got all my moral guidelines from there, as though I haven't got morals because I haven't got it. It's not really the case. It's not the case, no. Is it? Well, you don't know me, but it's not the case. Right.
No, I can tell from your questions.
Final question, and I asked this to a lot of people, and no one knows how to answer this, but I've got faith in you being able to answer this. Final question of the podcast: what is the meaning of life?
I think the meaning of life ultimately is beyond our experience of this world. Enough of it kind of, in the days of Elimination, from the days of vinyl, when you love a record so much you play it over and over again, and you used to I used to sometimes get up at 2 o'clock in the morning when I was a boy and go downstairs and play records on my dad's radiogram, but really, really quietly because I didn't want to wake anyone up. So I used to listen really intently. And you remember when you put the needle on the vinyl, you get that pre-echo. And it's like the fantasticness of the record is just pushing back a little bit, and you just get a little... And I know it now because I went to hear an opera that I really love. And I realised listening to the opera, I was hearing the pre-echo on the vinyl of the recording I had when I first got to know it. And it's a bit like that, I think. There's a pre-echo, and you pick up on that sometimes, and you think...
And then it all comes to an end. Like this podcast, we've got to... I don't want to end it, because I actually reckon I could sit here for about 3 hours discussing this, because I'm absolutely fascinated by it. But we have come to the end. Your album, the Reverend Richard Coles, Songs for Christmas, is out now. Obviously, you can download it and do all that sort of stuff. All that stuff. Best luck with that. If people want to follow you on Twitter or social media, what are you on? Just Twitter? Or
At Rev Richard Coles.
Okay.
At Rev Richard Coles.
Do you do Instagram?
Well, Di, my partner, on strictly trying to make me do Instagram. It's just too complicated for me.
And where else can people, what radio and what else are you doing at the moment?
Well, I co-present Saturday Live on BBC Radio 4 at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and various other things. I do Pause for Thought with Chris Evans on Radio 2 on really Friday mornings. Not every Friday morning, but some of them. And then I kind of pop up on things a bit now, in the way that you do. I've just done I've done some lovely Christmas shows. I've done, for Channel 5 Go in Search of Santa, with Marlene from Only Fools and Horses, Christopher Biggins, Rusty Lee and Joe Pasquale.
Oh, brilliant.
Brilliant fun. I've done the Tim Vine Christmas show. That's coming up. And I've done Would I Lie to You, the Christmas show too.
See, I really want to go on that show.
You should go on that show.
But they haven't asked me.
You'd be great on that show.
I'd love to do it. I just think that show's just so funny. Those two guys, well, those three, they're just brilliant, aren't they?
I was sat next to Lee Mack, and he went off on a kind of trope. It's one of the funniest things I've ever heard.
He's brilliant.
Dazzling.
He's absolutely brilliant.
I laughed so much, I honestly was only barely managing to contain myself.
What I like about that show, though, is how David Mitchell, Lee Mack, and Rob Brydon, they're actually laughing as well. Yeah. They're doing the jokes, but they're laughing with each other because it's so funny, yeah.
I mean, it's an absolute masterclass in comedy, actually. They're brilliant.
Thank you so much for doing the podcast.
Pleasure. My pleasure, really. Thanks, Tim.
Cheers. Yeah, the Reverend Richard Coles there. I thoroughly enjoyed that interview. I learnt a lot. His album, Songs for Christmas, is out now. I think my favourite carol to sing, Mark, is Hark the Herald Angels Sing, which is
Are you going to give us a little verse now?
No.
Why?
Because I can't sing. My voice is
But it'll be a little Christmas gift for all the listeners.
No, I can't sing. I do like a Christmas carol sing-along, though. I do like it. I don't, maybe it's being a bit disrespectful, but I don't really listen to the words too much. But I do like a little sing-song. And I think carols are in such a way that they're quite nice to sing, aren't they?
What's your favourite Christmas song that isn't a carol? Pop song?
I always, if I'm listening to a collection of music, I'll go for Dean Martin. Even though that's not Christmas songs, to me it feels like it's Christmas. So I listen to that. But my standalone Christmas single, which isn't a Christmas single, is "Stay Now" by E17. However, they wore white puffer jackets, and it was at Christmas time. So to me, it
Weren't
was
they white Parkers?
Oh yeah, Parkers. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was. That's right. Yeah. What's your favourite Christmas song?
John Lennon, of course. War is over.
Okay. Yeah, good song. Anyway,
Of course it is.
I thoroughly enjoyed that interview. I hope you did as well. It's really nice when you get someone with a lot of intellect on a subject like that,
Yeah.
and also media
It
friendly.
makes a change from us two, doesn't it?
Yeah, media friendly was what I like about that.
Yeah.
So I thoroughly enjoyed it. As I say, the album Reverend Richard Coles' Songs for Christmas is out now. We'll see you all very shortly. So for the time being, peace and Lovejoy.
Bye.